Grüß Gott, I'm Sister Martina, and we are going to talk today about Pope John Paul II. Of course, we will need some 20 videos to talk about his pontificate, even superficially. But anyway, let's try to do our best here. When Paul VI died in 1978, there was, of course, in the world and in the church, an atmosphere of darkness, of fear, of disorientation. It was the time of the end of the Cold War, I mean, before its end, and things were very much, of course, around the world, full of revolutions and fights and ideological problems and enmities. And people who still remember that time, the hippie revolution, the sexual revolution, and so on. And of course, the church itself, after the council, was very much divided between the said progressists and traditionalists, even to the point in which some liberals, progressists, became practically Marxists. That's what happened in Latin America, for example, with the so-called liberation theology. And on the other side, some people connected to the old traditions really even came to the point of denying the council and denying the authority of the Pope. As we said, Pope Paul VI was a martyr. And when he died, there was no clear candidate. And of course, people thought, I mean, who could be the Pope in this new time, the poor man? The cardinals elected once more someone who could make somehow a middle way, they thought, because he was also known, clearly known by his sanctity, Cardinal Albino Luciani, also an Italian, who took the name, the first double name in the church history, John Paul, in of course, continuation, respect, and admiration for the two popes that came before him. And he got known as the Pope of the Smile, the smiling Pope, because his personality was a loving personality, a very fatherly, a very parish priest personality. And that's actually what we remember about him. 30 days about his election, he died in his sleep from a heart attack. And we can well imagine, the people who remember it, how much the conspiracy theories went around the world, in the Catholic and non-Catholic world. The Pope was, of course, assassinated. The leftist people said the rightist killed the Pope, and vice versa. And inside the church even, the progressives said that the Pope suffered so much with the traditionalists and so on. And until today, there are many people who believe that the Pope was murdered. He died from a heart attack in his sleep. And this is a small wonder, because, I mean, the burden on his shoulders was immense. And the moment became then really a moment of almost despair. I mean, where are we going? Even for non-Catholics and non-Christians, the church is a very stark, strong, old historical institution. And when even the church doesn't have a pope, or the pope was murdered 30 days after his election, I mean, where are we going? Who can save us? And this is the end of the world, and so on. For people who are more rational, I remember here André Froissart, the famous French journalist and writer. He was there at the St. Peter's Square at the second conclave, and he said, we really thought and thought, but we could not find a candidate. Who could be? Because if he was more liberal, then the traditionalists would make a breach inside the church, and vice versa. I mean, what kind of man could be the new pope? And then a man was elected, Froissart says too, but many other people too, that seemed to be somehow the hand of God in history. This is one of these very, very rare historical giants, not only in the church, but it happens also in common history. A man that was completely unexpected, actually unknown. He had participated very young in the council, helping with the document about religious liberty, very important document, but nobody knew him. They couldn't even say his surname, Wojtyła, Wojtyła, was ist das? What is that? I'm sorry. And he was a surprise, but somehow, as Froissart says, history seems to have stopped for a moment. God put his hand in history and then let history go on. And from the beginning, from his appearance in St. Peter's Square, he was very young, 58 years old, he brought immediately hope, joy, security, infinite, how do you call it, Zuverlässigkeit, we say in German, confiability. And his first mass, very famous, we can see it in video still, were marked by his famous words: "Do not be afraid. Be not afraid. Let's go on. Let's trust God. Let's open ourselves to God." And he became, from day to night, an image and an icon of hope, of strength, of joy in faith. In 1,000 years, people will be still studying the pontificate of John Paul II, the second longest in history after Pius IX, the Pope that most wrote. His encyclicals, I mean, each one of them is a philosophical study in itself, theological study, and who most traveled, of course, around the world. Those of us who still remember him, like I did, I grew up in his pontificate, can still feel, mostly when we met him, the enormous strength and joy and goodness that came from this man. A man like other men that has also had, of course, his failures, his problems. The story of in the United States, of the Church in the United States, somehow reveals it. Not always, of course, nominating the best bishops, but this is it's unavoidable. He's just a man like all the rest of us. But in any case, a great Pope, and surely, clearly, a saint. We could see that already, those who knew him. He came from a very humble Polish family. His father was a soldier. He lost his mother when he was 9, and his only brother when he was 12. And his father, during World War II, when he was 19, was left completely alone in the midst of a world war that was for Poland. People say World War II killed 1/3 of Polish population. And he survived only because he was very young, and he found work at a forced work place, chemical industry, and then stone quarry. And he entered the seminary still during the war, studying at night and working during the day, 15, 16 hours, like a slave work, really. And he became later a professor in Poland during communist times, and was, of course, the theater actor, was someone who could wonderfully communicate with others, was a man of culture, was a man of philosophy, was a deeply personal man, a man who loved family and friends, who knew many Jews, for example. And all of this he brought to the pontificate when he became Pope. We all remember, at least seen in videos, his first visit to Poland, for example. He could not be labeled a communist. He could not be labeled a conservative in the other sense, a man of right. He escaped, so to say, all kinds of intents of classifying him somehow. He was much, much above all these things. And that's why one felt in his presence totally free. It's not a question anymore of ideologies, of fighting between this or that group. It's a question exactly of loving God and going ahead with the mission of the Church. And because of this clear faithfulness to God and to the deepest Christian values, is that he actually could make a kind of revolution in the Church, not in the sense of bringing new things, but exactly in the sensing of what the Council said, remembering the essential things. And of course, we cannot here describe, there are many wonderful biographies about him, all that he did against communism in Europe, for example, or for the families, or for exactly the fundamentals of philosophy and theology in the modern world. All that he wrote, all that he did, all the trips he made, the intuition he had to visit each country and find in each country the authentic cultural expression of the country, and so somehow bringing up the best things in this culture, and uniting it with Catholic, with Christian values. I mean, he was a giant. He was a completely extraordinary man, extraordinary Pope, who suffered immensely, including in his old age. He was very sick, of course, we all remember that, and offering this suffer for the world. And we perhaps remember his burial, the people, thousands and thousands of people going through St. Peter's Church. He will be remembered and studied for many, many centuries to come. And he, of course, brought to the church what exactly it needed, even with of course, little fault, because he was the one who confirmed the council, the Vatican Council, in its good and proper direction. He was a council pope, of course, and his name shows it. But he put aside completely all the misinterpretations about the council. Of course, for those who want to see it, I mean, people can still say whatever they wish. But studying John Paul II, we see exactly what is the church, why are we there, what is the direction, exactly what the world needed. I mean, we have again this leader who is not taking himself as us to him himself, but taking us to God, showing us the way to God. And we still live more or less in this kind of atmosphere which he brought. He is, of course, someone who deserves to be read and studied, and always again and again observed and known, not because of himself, but because he brings us to God, which is the mission of the Pope. May John Paul II, Saint John Paul II bless us, and until next time.